answer key for Unit 4, assignment number 5. Please feel free to fast forward to whichever question you need. So we're going to start by completing the square to solve to find our x-intercepts, and then we're going to change the equation to vertex form to find the vertex and axis of symmetry. So the first step of our process is to move our c value, our constant, to the other side of the equal sign. So in question 1, we're going to start by adding 15 to both sides. We'll be left with x squared plus 14x equals 15. Now from here, we do half of our b. Our b is 14. Our b is always the x coefficient. So half of 14 equals 7. Then we take that 7 and we square it. We get 49. The 49 we need to add to both sides of the equation to keep it balanced. If we add the 49 to both sides, that's like the algebra tiles we needed to add in the lesson to make the square. So we added 49 to both sides of our equation. On the left side, we're going to write that as a binomial squared. We always have our x in there. And then remember, inside the parentheses, it always worked out to be our half of b. So in this case, it's plus 7, and we square it. So that's our left side. Equals, and then over on the right side, we just have 15 plus 49, and that equals 64. We have our squared term all by itself on the left side. So to undo the square, we square root. So we have x plus 7. It could equal, the square root of 64 could be positive 8. Or x plus 7 could equal negative 8. Remember, the square root of 64 could be plus 8, or it could be minus 8. We just solve each equation. We get x equals 1, x equals negative 15. Those are the solutions to this equation. If we were to graph, these would also be our x-intercepts. Now, speaking of graphing, our next task then, we would want to take our equation and find our vertex and axis of symmetry. I'm going to rewrite the equation up here from when we completed the square. And then to get our vertex form, we just need to move the 64 back over to the left side. So to move a positive 64, I'm going to subtract it back over. We will have x plus 7, quantity squared, minus 64 equals 0. The 7 inside the parentheses is going to make us go left 7. The negative 64, we go down 64. So the vertex for this left 7 is negative 7. The 64 is down, so it would also be negative. That is our vertex. Our axis of symmetry is x equals, and it's always the x value at the vertex. We're not going to go ahead and graph the whole thing. I just want us to be able to find the different pieces. We've definitely practiced the graphing enough that we should know where those things would go on our graph if I asked you to. Question number 2, same process. We're going to go ahead and move that c value or the constant to the other side. We have a negative 16 or a minus 16, so we're going to add 16 to both sides. On the left side, we have x squared minus 6x, and now we equal 16. Now we start our process. We need to do half of b. We have to be careful though. b in this case is a negative 6. So we get negative 3. We take our negative 3, making sure we put parentheses around it, and we square it. Negative 3 squared should give us 9. That's the value we need to make our square on the left side. So x squared minus 6x, we need to add 9 to make that side a square, a perfect square. And then to keep the equation balanced, I also need to add 9 to the side with 16. If I only add it to one side, I've changed my equation. On the left side, we're going to go ahead and write that trinomial as a binomial squared. We always have our x. And then remember, the number inside the parentheses is always our half of b. We square it. And then on the other side, 16 plus 9 is 25. My squared term is by itself on the left, so to undo the square, we square root both sides. We're going to have x minus 3 equals, could be positive 5 for the square root of 25, or x minus 3 would equal negative 5. Remember, when I take the square root of 25, it could be 5 or negative 5. Add 3 to both sides, x equals 8. Add 3 to both sides, x equals negative 2. If I were to ask you to graph, those would be your x-intercepts on your graph. Now if I take my equation that we completed the square for, and if I want to find the vertex and axis of symmetry, all I have to do is move the 25 back over to the left side. We'll have x minus 3 squared minus 25 equals 0. Now we have that vertex form. The minus 3 inside would cause the graph to go right 3. The minus 25 outside would cause the graph to go down 25. So the vertex right 3 would be positive, down 25 would be negative. Axis of symmetry is always x equals, and it's always the x value from the vertex. Moving on to question 3, our process is not changing. It's going to be the same process for each question. Start by moving the c value to the other side, or in other words, and this time it's negative 5. We're going to add 5 to both sides. So I have x squared plus 2x on the left equals 5 on the right. Now I find half of my b value, which would be 1. I take the 1 and I square it. It still stays 1. To make my square, I'm going to add 1 to the left side, and then to keep things balanced, I'm going to add 1 to the right side. On the left side, I'm going to make my binomial squared. So we're going to have x, and then half of b was positive 1, and then we equal 6. The squared term is all by itself over on the left, so we're going to square root to undo the square. Now this one doesn't work out so perfect. We have x plus 1 equals, and for our purposes, we're going to go ahead and round. The square root of 6 is roughly 2.45. So I'm going to go ahead and put my squiggly equal sign there because this will not be an exact answer. And then x plus 1 is approximately negative 2.45. Subtract 1 from both sides. X is approximately 1.45. And then subtract 1 from the second case. X is approximately negative 2.45. So if we were going to sketch a graph, I would use those approximate values for my x-intercepts. Now this form is also really easy. To get our vertex form, to easily find vertex and axis of symmetry with very, very little work. Take where we've completed the square. Move our 6 back over to the left side. And now we have our vertex form. The plus 1 inside is going to go left 1. The minus 6 outside is going to go down 6. Left 1 is negative. Down is also negative. Axis of symmetry is just the x value at the vertex. For question number 4, same process. Add your constant, your c value, to the other side. X squared minus 5x equals 8. Now this one's going to be just a little bit trickier because our b value is not an even number. So we still need to do half of negative 5. And that's going to be negative 5 halves. This is a nice decimal. Let's go ahead and use negative 2.5. We take negative 2.5 and we square it. And we get 6.25. Go ahead and use that decimal. We really shouldn't round any decimals, but this one is a nice terminating one. Leave it as 0.25. Now we need to make that square on that left side, so x squared minus 5x. We need to add 6.25 on the left. And to keep things balanced, we also need to add it on the right side. Making my binomial on the left side, we're going to have x, and then it's just our half of b, so negative 2.5, square it. And then on the right side, I'm going to have 14.25. The squared term is alone on the left side, so I'm going to go ahead and do the square root to undo the square. And we're going to have x minus 2.5. We're going to have to round again. The square root of 14.25 is not a perfect value. We're going to round that to 3.77. And then x minus 2.5 is going to approximately be negative 3.77. Add 2.5 to both sides. Our x is approximately 3.77 plus 2.5, 6.27. And then for our other side, we add our 2.5. X is approximately going to be negative 1.27. Again, if we were to graph this by hand, it would just be a sketch. And these are the values I would use for my x-intercepts. Now we're kind of out of space on this one, at least I ran out of space. To change this, I'm going to pop up here where I have a little bit of space. Maybe you need to grab a piece of scrap paper. Changing it to vertex form, I'm going to subtract the 14.25 to the other side. I don't have room to show that. To get the vertex, the negative 2.5 is going to move to the right. Negative 14.25 is going to move down. Axis of symmetry, we're going to have x equals, and it's the x value at the vertex. In question number 5, we see again where we have an odd value for our b, and that's okay. That's something we can work with. Let's go ahead and start by moving our 10 to the other side. We're going to subtract 10 to the other side. X squared plus 11x equals negative 10. Half of our b value, we get 11 halves. That's a nice decimal for us. We can put that as 5.5. That's what I would do if I were you. Then we have our 5.5. We need to square that. And we get 30.25. Again, go ahead and use the decimals. They're nice terminating decimals. Go ahead and use the decimals. Now, to make my square, I need to add 30.25 to the left. And then I need to add 30.25 to the right. I make my binomial squared on the left. So x Half of b was positive 5.5. We square it. And then over on the right, we have 20.25. Square root both sides to undo the square. We're going to have x plus 5.5. Square root of 20.25 is 4.5 exactly. So we're going to have the positive 4.5. And we're going to have the negative 4.5. Subtract 5.5 from both sides. And we end up with -1 for our x. And -10 for our x. Again, if we were to graph, these would be our x-intercepts. Then if we wanted our vertex and axis of symmetry, if we were graphing, we would go ahead and move the 20.25 back over to the left side. The plus 5.5, we're going to go left, 5.5. Minus 20.25, we're going to go down. Axis of symmetry is the x value at the vertex. All right, let's see if we can not run out of space for question 6. So we're going to start question 6. Move our constant to the other side. X squared minus 8x equals -15. I find half of my b. Be very careful. b is -8. So half of b is -4. -4, when I square it, I need to make sure I use parentheses so I get a positive outcome. X squared minus 8x, I need to add 16 to make my square. To keep things balanced, I also need to add 16 to the -15. I make my binomial. I use half of b, and then I square. Then over on the right, I get 1. I go ahead and I take the square root to solve. X minus 4, that could be +1. X minus 4 could equal -1. Go ahead and add 4 to both sides. X could be 5. X could be 3. If we were to graph, these would be my x-intercepts. To easily find vertex and axis of symmetry, if you were to graph, move the 1 back over to the left side by subtracting it. It is separate from the squared term. +4, we're going to go left 4. Remember, that sign's always opposite. -1, we're going to go down 1. There's our vertex. Axis of symmetry, the x value matches the x value at the vertex. Please feel free to pause, rewind, rewatch, whatever you need from this answer key.